Hey guys, tonight we're drifting back to a place that was somehow even messier than your last group chat, the antebellum American South. Specifically, we're sneaking into the world of enslaved women on southern plantations, the real world, not the movie version with wistful violins and artfully dirty aprons. I know, not exactly light bedtime fare, but trust me, there's a strange comfort in knowing that history was always slightly more ridiculous, and a lot smellier than any of us ever imagined. Before we dig in, take a second to like, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment telling me if you're listening from a place where it's still socially acceptable to eat dinner at 8 p.m. Now, dim those lights, crank up a fan for the white noise, get comfortable, and maybe wrap up tight. Because tonight's story is a reminder that a bad day at work used to mean something much, much worse. Let's just pause and reflect. Have you ever wondered what it was actually like to live every day under rules so random you'd think the HOA wrote them? What did enslaved women do all day, besides? Try not to get yelled at for breathing too loud. Did anyone actually sleep on those straw pallets? Or was it more of a wishful lying down? Did people really cook for 100 mouths with nothing but a pot, 2 onions, and a prayer? What counted as me time in a house full of other people's drama, chores and chicken feathers? How did anyone keep a straight face while being scolded for talking back with nothing but a raised eyebrow? And in a world where your entire life could be changed by a rumor or a ledger entry, how did you find ways to laugh, love, or just exist? Congratulations. You've just woken up sometime around 1847. You're barefoot, tired, and the only thing louder than your stomach is the sound of someone yelling about cornmeal. Good luck. The day starts before the sun, because apparently, sleep is for free. The overseer's bell rings out in the dark, like the world's least fun alarm clock, and you, plus every other enslaved woman, are already scrambling. There's no snooze button here, just a cold splash of well water and the knowledge that you'd better get moving before the overseer finds you still horizontal. Let's set the scene. It's not just early, it's so early even the roosters are hitting ignore. The air is heavy with the kind of damp that seeps into your bones, and you can't see much except shapes moving in the gloom, a neighbor tying up her hair, a child muttering in her sleep, someone else fumbling for a shoe in the dark. If you're lucky, you get to wash your face in a bucket of water left out overnight. If you're not, you get a quick rinse with whatever's left at the bottom. Luxury. 1888 edition. You're not alone, of course. Every cabin is packed tight. So when that bell clangs, clumsy, relentless, always too loud, it's a chain reaction of movement. One person coughs, another mutters, and someone in the corner is already complaining about their knees. There's no such thing as waking up slowly here. Your body is moving before your mind can catch up, stepping over sleeping limbs and dodging the stray elbow as you reach for the ragged dress you tossed at the end of the bed last night. If it's clean, congratulations, you're dreaming. Let's talk about sound. The plantation doesn't so much wake up as it erupts. There's the bark of dogs outside, the metallic thud of the bell, and a growing chorus of voices, children being hurried along, someone muttering about chores, another person reciting a quiet morning prayer. The floor creaks, the door groans, and the air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, sweat, and the faint, desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, breakfast won't be yesterday's leftovers. Outside, the world is a dark blur. There's dew on the grass and mud on your feet before you even leave the cabin. Your breath makes little clouds in the cool morning air, and your toes curl against the chill, assuming you even have shoes, which, let's be honest, is about as likely as getting the day off. Sometimes you catch a sliver of pink on the horizon and think, maybe today will be different. It won't, but hope is free. The overseer, of course, is already lurking. He's like a sentient thundercloud, radiating bad mood and suspicious glances. You don't make eye contact if you can help it. Your goal is to blend in, move quickly, and not be the first or the last in line. Too fast, and you're rushing. Too slow, and you're lazy. It's the world's worst game of Simon Says, and nobody ever wins. Breakfast is a rushed affair. Maybe you're on kitchen duty, shoving cornbread into your mouth while stirring a pot for the next meal. Maybe you just gulp water and hope the day won't drag too long. The morning routine here is basically wake, dress, move, and pray you don't get in trouble before sunrise. The only thing more reliable than the bell is the sense that you're always running behind. And let's be honest, nobody's well rested. You sleep in shifts, you sleep light. You wake up sore from a bed that's mostly splinters and straw. Sometimes you wonder what it would feel like to wake up naturally, to let your eyes adjust to sunlight instead of a bossy bell and a chorus of hurry-ups. But this isn't that world. This is a place where your day begins before it begins, and the cost of just 5 more minutes is a sharp word, a missed meal, or worse. So you join the march, feet in the mud, head down, hands already stiff and sore from yesterday's work. You shuffle out of the cabin, merge into the slow-moving line of bodies heading toward the fields, the kitchens, the wash house. The sun is still an idea, and you're already halfway through your first task of the day. Congratulations. You're awake. The plantation is awake. And whether you're ready or not, the work and the day has begun. Let's talk about bedtime, which is mostly a rumor. You're squeezed into a cabin with more people than square feet, sleeping on a straw pallet or maybe an old blanket. If you're lucky, nobody's snoring in your ear. If you're unlucky, you're sharing with someone's feet, and the feet always win. This is not the sleep sanctuary from a mattress commercial. The reality is more like playing human Tetris with your entire family, plus an occasional neighbor or extra cousin who just needed a place to crash. Your mattress, if you can call it that, is a pile of straw that crunches every time you move, releasing a little cloud of dust and the subtle aroma of last week's hay bale. There are more lumps than a bowl of old gravy, and just as much mystery in the mix. If you think the memory foam is too firm, try a night with nothing between you and the wooden floor but wishful thinking and a few flat pieces of straw. Privacy? Forget about it. You're sleeping in a one-room cabin, with every cough, sniffle, and midnight mutter floating through the air like it's auditioning for a family chorus. It's not just your immediate family either. Sometimes you're bunking with 2, 3, or even 4 generations, all packed together like leftovers in a lunchbox. If there's a window, it's more like a hole plugged with rags or old shirts to keep the cold out. Spoiler, it doesn't work. The wind finds a way in, bringing with it every creak, groan, and snatch of conversation from the rest of the plantation. The noises at night are something else. The wind rattles the walls, mice scurry in the corners, and outside, the dogs take turns barking at ghosts, raccoons, or their own tails. Inside, there's always someone shuffling around. A baby crying, or a grown-up trying to hush everyone so they can snatch 20 minutes of precious sleep before the overseer's bell rings again. And always, always, there are feet, somebody's toes in your ribs, somebody's heel, poking your back, or that one kid who somehow manages to turn sideways in their sleep and sweep everyone else off the pallet like a broom made of knees. If you're tall, congratulations on your legs. They'll spend the night dangling off the edge of the bed, catching every draft that sneaks under the door. If you're short, you'll spend the night wedged between people and pillows, waking up with someone else's hair in your mouth. There are no blankets big enough, no space heaters, and definitely no scented candles. The only thing you're burning is body heat, and there's never quite enough to go around. And let's talk about bugs. Fleas, lice, and bed bugs have permanent residency status here. treating every new blanket as an invitation to move in and multiply. If you wake up itching, congratulations, you're alive. If you wake up without bites, you probably slept through your own midnight fidgeting or just built up a natural immunity. The body's way of giving up. You might try to shake out the straw or pick the bugs out, but there's only so much you can do with a candle stub and two tired hands. And forget about washing your sheets. Laundry is a special occasion reserved for holidays and emergencies. Usually the someone's thrown up kind. Sometimes, when the night is quiet, you can hear people whispering. Soft voices sharing stories, fears, hopes, and the occasional joke. These moments, as fleeting as they are almost enough to make you forget the cold, the drafts, and the constant threat of someone rolling over onto your face. There's comfort in shared misery. And sometimes, a little laughter can warm the chill more than any ragged quilt. But mostly, you lie there in the dark, listening to the night and trying to remember the last time you woke up feeling rested. Dreams come and go, often chased away by the reality of the morning bell or the sound of rain leaking through the roof. You tuck your knees in, pull the thin blanket tighter, and hope for a few hours of peace before it all starts again. Because in the world of sleeping arrangements on the plantation, comfort is rare, privacy is impossible, and even dreams have to squeeze in wherever there's room. The day's first challenge is finding something to wear. Ideally not the same dress you've been patching for 2 years. Clothes are rationed out twice a year, once in winter, once in summer. If it fits, great. If not, you improvise. Fashion is about survival, not style. Your main accessory is hope. Here's the scene. You wake up with the sun, or more accurately, the overseer's bell, and immediately embark on a scavenger hunt that would humble even the most hardcore thrift shoppers. You root through the pile of clothing at the end of your straw pallet, looking for something that isn't stiff with last week's mud or so riddled with holes it would scandalize a scarecrow. The smell is a mix of wood, smoke, sweat, and the faint perfume of this is clean enough. There is no closet. There is no dresser. There is, at best, a single nail on the wall and a dream. Every garment you own is on permanent display, hung on a peg, draped over a rafter, or crumpled somewhere in the corner, looking suspiciously like a stray dog. Some mornings, you're piecing together a dress from 3 different ones, a Frankenstein's monster of homespun and hand-me-down. If you're lucky, color kind of matches. If you're not, congratulations. You're pioneering the unintentionally avant-garde look. The material itself is, well, let's call it rustic. Most dresses and shirts are made from coarse homespun cotton or, in the winter, scratchy wool that's only slightly softer than the attitude of the plantation mistress. Brand new fabric is for the big house. What makes its way to you is usually faded, threadbare, and possibly older than you are. Repairs are a daily event. You become an expert in the fine art of making do, patching with whatever you can find. An old apron, a torn feed sack, or even a strip of fabric from last season's pants that finally gave up the ghost. If you're hoping for shoes, manage your expectations. Shoes are precious, so precious that you might own 1 battered pair, handed down twice, and worn only in winter or on Sundays. The rest of the year, your feet are your shoes. You get to know the feeling of grass, mud, gravel, and, if you're unlucky, splinters. Socks? Socks are an urban legend. If your feet are cold, you wrap them in rags or just walk a little faster. Then there are the undergarments, or rather, the lack of them. Underwear is not a daily occurrence. Sometimes it's a long, rough chemise. Sometimes it's nothing at all. Bras aren't even a rumor yet. If your clothes are too tight, you make do. If they're too loose, you tie them up with a bit of string, a strip of cloth, or sheer willpower. Laundry day, such as it is an ordeal that would make a modern washing machine short-circuit out of sympathy. You scrub your one dress in cold, gritty water with lye soap that smells like it could strip paint off a barn. And drying? Hang it on a fence or a tree branch and pray the rain holds off and the goats keep their distance. There's nothing quite like chasing a half-damp shirt through the mud at sunrise because a goat mistook it for breakfast. All this effort isn't about looking good, it's about getting by. The fashion police on the plantation are really just the overseer and the mistress, and their standards are as changeable as the weather, too ragged, and you get scolded for looking untidy. Too neat, and someone wonders if you're putting on airs. It's a balancing act, and you're walking the tightrope in a pair of patched-up skirts. And somehow, through all of this, style sneaks in anyway. Maybe it's a bright scrap of ribbon in your hair, a carefully mended hem, or the way you fold a headscarf. Maybe it's just the confidence of knowing you can make something out of nothing. You might not have a lot of choices, but you do have pride, and a stubborn streak that refuses to be covered up, no matter how many times your sleeves fall off. So you step out into the morning, patched up and pressed for time, your dress carrying the history of a dozen hands and 1,000 small triumphs over disaster. You may not look ready for a ball, but you're more than ready for whatever the day and the mud throws your way. Because here, fashion isn't about being seen, it's about surviving, one ragged, resilient layer at a time. Breakfast isn't a meal, it's a military operation. If you're assigned to the kitchen, you're feeding dozens with cornbread, molasses, and maybe a dash of dignity if there's time. If you're not cooking, you're eating fast because that bell waits for no one. Picture this. It's still barely light outside, and you're already elbows, deep in flour, dust, sweat, and the peculiar sense of urgency that only comes from trying to boil water faster by glaring at it. The kitchen isn't some air-conditioned oasis with shiny appliances and a barista on call. It's a separate wooden shack, sometimes attached to the big house, sometimes tucked behind it, always hotter than the sun by noon and colder than a tax collector's heart before dawn. The floor is packed earth, the fire is unpredictable, and the stove is whatever you can keep burning without setting the whole place alight. If you're on kitchen duty, your day starts in the blackest hours of morning. There's wood to haul, fires to coax into life with half-dry kindling, and pots the size of baby bathtubs to fill and carry. The menu isn't exactly a page-turner. Cornbread, a thick porridge or grits, maybe a few scraps of bacon if the plantation is feeling generous, and always a heavy ladle of molasses for the lucky or quick ones. There are no recipe cards, no measuring cups, and no complaints department. You cook with your hands, your eyes, and your memory. Plus whatever you can find that hasn't gone missing since last week. Breakfast prep is chaos in motion. Someone is sifting meal in the corner, someone else is cracking eggs, and a third person is trying to keep an eye on the youngest children who are generally more interested in playing with the firewood than eating breakfast. There's shouting, there's always shouting, and you learn quickly that if you want to keep your eyebrows, you don't lean too close to the hearth. The whole kitchen hums with the steady rhythm, spoons against pots, knives against chopping boards, and a never-ending chorus of "Watch that pan" and "Where's my spoon?" Meanwhile, the big house has its own demands. The food for the master's family must be ready first. Hot biscuits, eggs, maybe a slab of ham for those who won the genetic lottery of being born white and rich in the 19th century South. The plates must be spotless, the portions generous, and the kitchen staff invisible except when someone's yelling for more coffee. Breakfast for the enslaved people is another matter entirely. You eat last, you eat fast, and you eat standing up if the benches are already full. If you're not cooking, you're hustling. There's a pecking order to everything. The fastest and boldest get the biggest pieces, while the slowpokes get what's left at the bottom of the pot. You eat with one eye on your food and the other on the door, because the bell that calls everyone to the fields is always just a heartbeat away. Nobody wants to start a 12-hour shift on an empty stomach. But full is a relative term. There's always room for a little more, but never time to get it. For those precious few minutes, the kitchen is also a hub of gossip, laughter, and whispered complaints. Someone tells a joke. Someone else rolls their eyes. And for a moment, you remember what it feels like to be part of a community instead of just a machine. If you manage to snatch an extra crust or a fingerful of molasses, it's a victory worthy of song, or at least a quiet chuckle. And then, as quickly as it began, breakfast is over. The pots are scrubbed, the ashes swept, and everyone scatters to their daily duties. The fire crackles its last protest, the kitchen empties out, and you're left with the lingering scent of wood smoke, fried cornmeal, and something a little like hope. So you wipe your hands, square your shoulders, and step out into the morning. The day is waiting, the work is endless, and the bell, always the bell, is already ringing again. Breakfast is done, dignity intact, mostly, and you've survived another round of the daily plantation scramble. The cotton fields call, and so does back pain. You're bent over in the dirt from sunrise to sunset, picking, chopping, or planting. There's no SPF, just a floppy hat and the distant hope of clouds. Your only break? Maybe a sip of water and some side-eye at the overseer. Let's get one thing all straight. Field work on a southern plantation is not a gentle stroll through nature with a picnic basket and a motivational playlist. It's hours upon hours in a sea of green, knees caked with mud, fingers aching, and sweat finding creative new places to drip. You start moving before the sun really decides to show up. Sometimes the moon is still on shift, just as tired as you are. There's dew on the cotton leaves, chill in the air, and a gnawing reminder in your belly that breakfast was more suggestion than meal. Your job, along with the dozens of others around you, is all about speed and stamina. Cotton plants don't care about your plans, your blisters, or your mood. You pick until your fingers are raw, stripping sharp little burrs from the bowls and stuffing them into a sack that seems to get heavier every step. Every now and then, a thorn bites you right through the calluses. You keep going. There's always more cotton, always more work, and always the knowledge that slow hands mean trouble. And the weather. Let's talk about the weather. In the summer, the sun is basically a giant angry spotlight, determined to melt you where you stand. There's no sunscreen, no sports drink, no hydration reminder on your Fitbit. Your only protection is a wide-brimmed hat if you've managed to make or borrow one, and a headscarf tied so tight it leaves a mark. The heat radiates up from the dirt, sweat stings your eyes, and the air tastes like hot dust and stubbornness. You pray for a cloud, a breeze, or just for the sun to take a lunch break. No luck. In the winter, the fields are just as unforgiving. But now you're fighting the cold. The wind slices through your dress and up your sleeves. Your hands are stiff. And the ground is so hard it laughs at your shovel. And yet, you keep at it. Because the cotton doesn't pick itself. And the overseer's shadow is always lurking. Speaking of which, the overseer is a constant presence. Sometimes you hear his boots crunching down the row before you see him. He's got a stick, a scowl, and a stopwatch in his head. Every movement is watched. Every pause is noted. And you learn fast to keep working even when your muscles scream for a rest. If you have to stop, maybe to shake a pebble out of your shoe, or to wipe a drop of sweat from your eye, you do it with one eye on him and the other on your work. And don't even think about complaining. Around here, sarcasm is a luxury item, and side-eye is the only safe protest. Breaks are rare and short. If you're lucky, someone passes you a tin cup of warm water that tastes like the inside of an old boot. You gulp it down and get back to it. Because there's always a row left to hoe, always more plants to chop, always more weeds to pull. Conversation happens in quick bursts, whispers of gossip, a joke muttered under your breath, or a half-sung work song that makes the hours pass a little faster. Your body aches in ways you didn't know were possible. Your back is a knot, your hands are swollen, and your feet are throbbing inside shoes that should have been retired 3 harvests ago. Blisters become calluses, calluses become scars, and you learn to ignore the sting as best you can. By noon, the sweat has glued your dress to your skin. By sunset, you're not sure you even remember your own name. Just the rhythm of reaching, pulling, stuffing. Repeat. Still, there are moments, tiny victories. Maybe you find a shady patch at the end of a row, or someone shares a stolen piece of fruit. Maybe the wind picks up, and for a minute, you feel almost human again. Sometimes, a quick look and a shared laugh with the woman next to you is enough to remind you that you're not alone. And as the sun finally dips behind the trees, you straighten up, if you can, brush the dirt off your aching legs, and join the slow parade back to the cabins. Tomorrow, it all starts again. Sun, sweat, and sore backs. But tonight, you've earned every minute of rest you can find. Not everyone's outside. If you work in the big house, you're up before the white folks, scrubbing floors, fixing clothes, or chasing after other people's children. Multitasking is survival, and rest is what happens to other people somewhere else. Let's talk about what it means to be the engine that keeps a southern plantation's finer things running, even though nobody's putting your name on the guest list. While fieldwork is backbreaking, housework is a never-ending ballet of labor, tiptoeing from chore to chore on a floor that, frankly, will never be clean enough for the lady of the house. Your morning starts in the dark, because sunrise is for slackers and the big house needs to sparkle before anyone important opens their eyes. The goal? Make it look like magic elves did the work overnight. Spoiler, it's just you, some soap, and a bucket that leaks. First up, floors. Every single one needs to be swept, scrubbed, and sometimes even waxed until you can see your plows. Own reflection, usually with a haunted expression, because the work never ends. And just as you finish, a child or a chicken, sometimes both, don't ask, will undo your progress with muddy footprints, crumbs, or the world's stickiest jelly. You sigh, grab your rag, and start again. Then there's laundry, which is basically a full-body workout performed with zero gym equipment. You're boiling water, scrubbing stains on a washboard until your knuckles ache, and hanging clothes to dry while praying the weather doesn't change, or the plantation dogs don't decide to play tug-of-war with the sheets. Linens, dresses, shirts, pants, they all pile up like a textile avalanche, and you're always one step behind. Next comes the endless sewing, mending, and improvising. That dress the mistress wore to church last Sunday? Torn hem, loose button, mysterious stain, probably gravy, possibly regret. You patch, you stitch, you save the family wardrobe from total collapse, all with a needle so tiny you're convinced it was forged by a vengeful spirit. The end result might not be fashion-forward, but it holds together, and that's more than you can say for most things around here. If you're thinking about a break, think again. The house is a living obstacle course of demands. The baby is crying, the master's coat needs brushing, and someone is shouting from upstairs about the wrong tea being served. Again. Meals must be cooked, coffee must be hot, and the silver must shine bright enough to blind anyone rude enough to look for spots. Oh, and let's not forget about childcare. The children of the big house are, generously, a handful. You're expected to keep them fed, clothed, quiet, and somehow not sticky, which frankly should qualify as a miracle. You chase them through hallways, redirect tantrums, and become the world's fastest toy retriever. Occasionally, they say thank you. But most of the time, you're invisible until something goes wrong, and then, suddenly, everyone remembers your name. There's also the small matter of etiquette. You're expected to move quietly, speak softly, and anticipate every possible need before it's even mentioned. If the master wants a book, it better appear. If the missus wants her shawl, you'd best not make her ask twice. And whatever you do, don't get caught looking idle, even if you've just worked through breakfast, lunch, and dinner without sitting down. By midday, your feet are already threatening mutiny, your back is plotting revenge, and your mind is racing through a to-do list that never actually gets shorter. Every sound, the creak of a stair, the call from the kitchen, the sudden crash of a dropped teacup, is a summons to action. And every finished task is met not with gratitude, but with another request. But here's the wild part. Somehow, you find ways to cope. Maybe you sing softly as you work, trading secret jokes with the other house servants. Maybe you share a bit of blom, leftover cake, or swap tips on getting wine stains out of the master's shirt. Sometimes you catch a glimpse of yourself in a polished surface and allow the briefest smile. Because against all odds, you're still here, still standing, still getting it done. So when the sun finally goes down and the house quiets, you slip away, knowing that your work will never be finished, but you'll be back tomorrow, broom in hand, ready to make a little more magic before anyone else wakes up. On a southern plantation, the real engineering happens in silence, with calloused hands and an iron will. Rest is for other people. Survival is your masterpiece. If you have children, you're raising them in the cracks between chores, hoping they'll be safe, and knowing you have almost no control over what happens next. Nap time is a myth, and every cry is a tiny alarm bell. Let's be real. There's no such thing as a parenting book for enslaved mothers, unless it's written on the back of a feed. Sack and starts with good luck. Your day is already a whirlwind of kitchen smoke, wash buckets, and endless yes ma'ams. Now, add a small, sticky, endlessly curious child to the mix. Congratulations, you're performing the hardest job in history. On the hardest difficulty setting, you start your day before the sun, hauling water or kneading dough, with a baby strapped to your back, or a toddler trailing behind you like a slightly less helpful shadow. Childcare is a group project, because it has to be. Grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, everyone pitches in. If you're in the field, you might tuck your youngest under a shady tree at the edge of the cotton rows, where older kids try to entertain the babies with songs or stories, hoping the overseer doesn't notice the extra commotion. Every moment you're away, you're worrying. Are they safe? Are they hungry? Will you come back to find them there? Or has the world changed again while your back was turned? Meals are another adventure. There's no high chair, no organic puree, and definitely no mealtime routine. You feed your child with one hand while turning cornmeal with the other. A mouthful for you, a mouthful for them. If you're lucky, the ratio is even. If not, well, you pretend your stomach isn't growling quite as loud as theirs. Sometimes, when there's a rare treat, like a bit of molasses or a piece of sweet potato, you savor the look on your child's face as they taste something good. It's a small victory, and you take them where you can get them. Teaching happens everywhere. You don't have books, but you have stories, old songs, whispered lessons, bits of African folklore folded into the fabric of everyday life. Your children learn to listen, to watch, to remember. They learn what to say and, maybe more importantly, what not to say when a white face appears in the doorway. They learn how to hide in plain sight, how to share, and how to survive. Childhood games happen in quick bursts, between chores, between tasks, between one grown-up's not now and another's be careful. And always there's the warning, stay close, don't wander, listen to your mama. But fear is never far away. Every mother knows that at any moment, a child could be sent to the big house as a servant, or, worse, sold away to another plantation, miles down a dirt road that might as well be the moon. There are no guarantees, no safety nets. No, just wait until you're older. Some nights, you hold your child tight, whispering promises you hope you never have to break. Promises that you'll be there, that you'll find them, that you'll remember. Every hug is half love and half goodbye, because nobody owns their future here. Illness is another monster. If your child has a fever, you mix up home remedies from roots, leaves, or whatever the elders remember. There's no doctor, no medicine, just faith and a lot of desperate hope. You keep an eye out for infection, for bites, for coughs that won't quit. If you're lucky, your child survives another round. If not, well, there aren't words for that kind of loss. Only the quiet ache that never goes away. Yet, somehow, joy persists. There's laughter in the cabins, games in the dust, songs at bedtime, even if bedtime is just a wish. You teach your children to dance, to clap out rhythms on an old washboard, to find beauty in a broken world. You share dreams with them, because hope is the last thing to be taken. Motherhood, here, is an act of daily resistance. You fight for every moment of love, every scrap of safety, every future you can imagine. You raise your children in the cracks between sorrow and hope, praying they will grow strong, wise, and somehow free. Because if you can give them nothing else, you give them your courage. And in a place designed to break spirits, sometimes courage is enough to keep going, one day, one hug, one heartbeat at a time. Dinner is a group event, but not the fun kind. The food is basic. Beans, greens, cornbread, maybe some pork if the week went unusually well. You eat fast, sitting on logs or dirt, trading jokes and gossip between bites because laughter is the only spice on the menu. Let's set the table, except there isn't one. Plates are a luxury, forks are a rumor, and everything tastes just a little bit like whatever was cooked in the pot last week. Meals are communal out of necessity. After a day spent picking, scrubbing, or chasing children, everyone gathers around whatever counts as the dining area, a patch of hard earth outside the cabin, a log that's seen better decades, or, if it's raining, anywhere that isn't currently leaking on your head. If you're lucky, you get a seat close to the pot, which means your serving is a little bit hotter, maybe a little less watery. If you're unlucky, you're scraping up the last bits, wondering if the dog has a better deal. Nobody's serving up second helpings, unless seconds means finishing what someone else's kid couldn't swallow. In this kitchen, portion control is less about health and more about hoping the cornbread stretches just a little further. Cornmeal is the headliner at nearly every meal, sometimes fried, sometimes baked, sometimes floating in a pot as a kind of heroic, if gluey, porridge. If you're tired of cornbread, congratulations, you've discovered the local specialty. Disappointment. Sometimes there are beans, simmered until they surrender, or wild greens plucked from the edge of the field. Pork shows up like a celebrity, usually in the form of a scrap or two, more flavor than substance. If there's enough to go around, it's a celebration. If not, you pretend the beans are extra tasty and move on. The cooking pot is never empty, just endlessly recycled. New food gets tossed on top of the old, and flavors mingle in ways no recipe book could ever predict. Every meal is a surprise, and not always a good one. There's a running joke. If you can name 12, if you have what's in the stew, you're either the cook or you're lying. Sometimes, a bit of molasses is drizzled on bread for dessert, if there's any left from breakfast. Sugar is rare. Spices are even rarer. And salt is guarded like a state secret. So you make do with laughter, stories, and the occasional whiff of flavor from someone's secret stash. You eat quickly, not because anyone's in a rush for seconds, but because dusk falls fast and chores are never really done. Kids shovel in food between giggles and squabbles, adults swap gossip about the day, and someone always manages to slip in a joke about the overseer's hair or the master's new boots. For a few minutes, the outside world recedes. You're just people, tired and hungry, united by the business of survival. Every meal is a reminder of both scarcity and community. There's never quite enough food, but there's always someone willing to share. If a neighbor's child is sick, you set aside a spoonful. If someone has nothing at all, you break off a bit of your cornbread. Hunger makes you practical, but it also makes you generous in ways that surprise even yourself. And yes, sometimes the food is downright tragic. You chew slowly, wondering if the strange taste is from a new type of greens or a spoon that wasn't rinsed. But the jokes keep coming, and somehow they make even the plainest meal go down easier. In the flickering firelight, faces blur and worries fade, replaced by the simple comfort of being together. No fine china, no sparkling cider, just beans, cornbread, and the knowledge that at least, for this one meal, you're not alone. When the meal is finished, everyone chips in to clean up. The pot is rinsed, the fire stoked for tomorrow, and plates, if you have any, are wiped and stacked for another round. Bellies aren't always full, but spirits are just a bit lighter. Because here, dinner isn't just about what's on the table, but about who's around it. And if laughter is the only seasoning, then tonight at least you're eating well. Somehow, there's still friendship. Maybe it's swapping stories by candlelight, or sharing scraps of cloth to patch a neighbor's dress. In a world built to isolate, connection is an act of rebellion, one whispered joke at a time. Life on the plantation is designed to keep people apart. Different cabins, different jobs, different rules for every day of the week. But people have a way of finding each other, like roots under the hard ground, stubborn and silent. You learn quickly that community isn't just something nice to have. It's how you survive. You lean on neighbors for help, for laughter, for the reminder that you're still a person when everything else tries to make you an object. Evenings are when the magic happens, after the day's work is done, after the fields, the big house, the wash tubs, and the never-ending chores. You gather wherever you can. Maybe it's on a porch, maybe it's by a fire, maybe it's around the shakiest table in the county, surrounded by children who should already be asleep. The only light comes from a candle or the last embers in the hearth, throwing strange shadows and making the world feel both smaller and safer. The talk starts quietly, a slow simmer, Someone shares news from another plantation, who got married, who got in trouble, who managed to sneak away to freedom and sent a message back. There's advice too, how to quiet a cough, how to fix a dress, how to keep hope alive when the rules say not to. A scrap of cloth passed from one hand to another is more than just a patch for a dress. It's proof that someone cares enough to notice your need. In a place where almost nothing belongs to you, generosity is as rare and precious as a diamond. Jokes are currency. They buy you a moment of lightness, a break from the weight. Maybe you rib someone about their snoring or make fun of the master's bad singing. Maybe you come up with a nickname for the plantation dogs or invent a story about a chicken who outsmarts the overseer. The jokes are often sharp, always clever, and occasionally so risky you can only share them in a whisper. If you've ever tried not to laugh at the wrong time, well, you know the feeling. Community is also built on quiet comfort. Sometimes it's just a hand on your shoulder or a look that says, "I see you." If a child is sick, everyone pitches in. Someone brings herbs. Someone else sits up all night with the mother. Someone fetches water without being asked. When the news is bad, the grief is shared. When it's good, the joy spreads 3 times as fast. There's an unspoken rule. Nobody is left alone unless they want to be. Even religion, which the master thinks he controls, becomes an underground lifeline. After dark, people gather to sing, to pray, to remember the ancestors, and whisper their names into the night. These meetings are risky, sometimes forbidden outright, but they're worth every danger. Song and prayer aren't just rituals. They're ways to claim a little bit of freedom, if only for a few minutes. The right hymn sung in the dark can feel like a window opening, just wide enough for hope to slip through. The children are always watching, always learning. They play games with rules older than memory, inventing new ones out of nothing but sticks, stones, and scraps. They see how grown-ups take care of each other, how a pot of stew stretches further when someone's hungry, how laughter matters as much as bread. Community teaches them to look after each other and to trust, even in a world that says not to. Of course, there are arguments and jealousies. Maybe someone's words cut a little too deep, or maybe you have a falling out that smolders for weeks. But most of the time, those things pass, because tomorrow you'll need each other again. Forgiveness is as necessary as breakfast, sometimes more so. So, when you find yourself surrounded by friends, by family, by neighbors who know every one of your secrets and still show up, you realize that community isn't just something you build, it's something you fight for. In a place built to break spirits, connection is the strongest kind of resistance there is, made not of bricks or chains, but of laughter, kindness, and a stubborn refusal to let anyone face the world alone. Act of rebellion, one whispered joke at a time. Evenings bring prayer, songs, and stories. Faith is a survival strategy as much as a belief. Whether in hush arbors or secret meetings, enslaved women build spiritual armor against a world that wants to break them. After a day that leaves your body sore and your spirit frayed, night is when the world finally slows down, at least a little. The cabins are quieter, children drift towards sleep, and the white folks have retreated behind closed doors. This is when faith slips in, soft as a hymn, steady as a heartbeat. For enslaved women, religion isn't a luxury or an option, it's a shield, a toolkit, and sometimes the only honest conversation you'll have all day. Church on the plantation is a strange beast. Sometimes, the master insists you show up for a Sunday service, where a preacher with a well-rehearsed smile tells you about obedience and the virtues of hard work. You nod along, careful to look respectful, But everyone knows the sermons are more about keeping you quiet than lifting your soul. But when the sun goes down and the fields are empty, real worship begins. Not in the open, but hidden away from watchful eyes. They call them hush arbors, little patches of woods or riverbanks, thick with shadows and the scent of moss. Here, faith sounds different. There are no pews, no polished Bibles, just a circle of friends and neighbors, voices low but fierce. Maybe you gather under a tree, maybe by the side of a creek, always listening for trouble. Someone starts a song, maybe a spiritual passed down through generations, the kind with words that double as prayers and as secret codes. Steal away, wade in the water, go down Moses, songs that speak of suffering, of hope, and, just maybe, of freedom. Prayer is woven into everything. It's a whispered wish while scrubbing a floor, a silent plea as you send your child off to the big house for chores. You pray for safety, for mercy, for strength. Sometimes you pray for justice, and sometimes, on the hardest days, you pray for the courage just to keep breathing. The prayers aren't always about miracles. Sometimes, they're about getting through one more night. Storytelling is its own kind of ritual. By the firelight, women share tales from Africa, old wisdom about ancestors who could fly, or tricksters who outsmarted the powerful. These aren't just bedtime stories, they're blueprints for survival. Each story is a reminder. You come from people who endured, who created joy from scraps, who carried whole cultures in their memories. You pass these stories on, mouth to ear, keeping the past alive even when everything else is stolen. And there's ritual in every small act. The way you braid your daughter's hair, the way you fold a quilt, the way you leave a stone at the base of a tree for someone who's gone. Ritual becomes resistance. Every gesture says, I am still here. I am more than what you see. Faith is also a quiet rebellion. For all the rules and restrictions, you find ways to meet, to sing, to hope. Sometimes you risk a whipping or worse, just to gather with others and feel for a moment that you belong to something bigger than cotton, bigger than sorrow. The overseer can count your work, the master can claim your labor, but nobody can tally your faith. For enslaved women, religion is more than Sundays and more than words. It's armor against despair, a protest against cruelty, and a lifeline to something unbreakable. The world may try to steal your time, your strength, your family, but hope in the shadows is a treasure nobody else can touch. And so, in the dream, hush of evening, when every muscle aches and every worry is still buzzing, you gather in secret, close your eyes, and sing into the dark. Your voice, quiet but fierce, joins with others to weave a tapestry of hope strong enough to survive even the longest night. And as you rise to face another day, you carry the music and the memory with you, a spark of light that nobody can snuff out. Romantic life exists, but not the way it does in novels. Marriages are rarely legal, always fragile, and constantly under threat of being split apart at someone else's whim. Still, people find ways to love and laugh, and sometimes that's the bravest act of all. Here's the truth. Love on the plantation is a miracle that happens quietly, in the gaps between chores, danger, and exhaustion. You don't have a diamond ring or a fancy wedding. There's no aisle to walk down, just a stretch of dirt road between cabins and a few precious moments when the overseer isn't looking. A marriage here isn't recognized by law, just by community, two people jumping the broom in front of their friends. Their promises more real than any piece of paper. You fall in love the way you fall into sleep, slowly, then all at once. Maybe you notice the way he laughs, even after 12 hours in the field. Maybe she brings you an extra piece of bread, or smooths your hair after a long day. It's not about grand gestures. Love is a patch sewn into a dress, a joke shared over cornbread, a look across the yard that says, "I see you and I'm still here." But there's a shadow hanging over every romance. At any moment, a partner can be sold away, gone in an instant, no goodbyes. Just the sound of a wagon rolling off into the distance. The plantation owner doesn't care about your vows. To them, families are just numbers on a ledger. Even if you've built a life together, shared meals, raised children, comforted each other through storms, someone else holds the power to tear it all apart. This uncertainty makes every moment together feel urgent, every touch more meaningful. People invent ways to hold on. Maybe you hide love notes in a fold of fabric or whisper promises in the dark. Maybe you walk a little slower on the path home, squeezing out a few extra seconds together before everyone scatters for evening chores. When you know tomorrow could change everything, you learn not to waste today. For those lucky enough to live on the same plantation, even sharing a cabin isn't guaranteed. Sometimes you and your partner are assigned to different houses, or even different fields, seeing each other only in stolen moments. If you're separated, you send messages through friends, or risk sneaking out at night for a whispered conversation under the stars. Letters, if you're lucky enough to know your letters, are precious. Read and reread until the paper falls apart. Jealousy and heartbreak are as common as joy. Maybe you catch your partner talking to someone else. Or maybe the pressure of survival makes tempers short and nerves frayed. Sometimes you fight over nothing, just because the world outside is so harsh that it leaks into everything inside. But most of the time, forgiveness wins, because you both know there are bigger battles to fight. There are weddings too, if you can call them that. No legal documents, just friends gathered to watch two people jump over a broomstick, symbolizing their new life together. Sometimes there's a song or a makeshift bouquet, or a feast built out of whatever scraps could be spared. The ceremony might be simple, but the meaning is deep. You're choosing each other, right here, right now, even when nothing is promised. And yes, there's laughter, in a world that wants you serious and scared. Laughter is a risk and a relief. Jokes whispered under blankets, gentle teasing, songs that poke fun at the overseer. These moments remind you that even if you can't control the world, you can still carve out joy. Children are born of these unions, and the whole community steps in to help raise them, knowing that love, like hope, can't be contained by fences or rules. Even when a family is torn apart, the memories and bonds persist, kept alive in stories and lullabies, a resistance as quiet as it is powerful. So, love on the plantation isn't fragile at all. It's tough, stubborn, and clever, finding ways to thrive in the worst conditions. It's a victory every time you get to say goodnight instead of goodbye. In a place where everything is watched and weighed, sometimes the boldest act is to keep loving anyway. The threat of punishment hangs in the air like humidity. Whippings, shouts, or worse. These aren't just fears, they're realities. Survival means reading every mood, every silence, and knowing when to disappear. You wake up each morning with your heart already tight in your chest. Because on a southern plantation, violence isn't just a rumor or a cautionary tale. It's built into the daily routine, as regular as sunrise and as unwelcome as a summer mosquito. The overseer's voice is the first storm cloud, loud, sharp, and always ready to break. You learn quickly that the tone of a single word can mean the difference between a normal day and a nightmare. The whip is more than a tool, it's a symbol, hanging from the overseer's belt like a coiled threat. You've heard it crack. You've seen the scars it leaves, and you know the rules can change without warning. Maybe you were too slow picking cotton. Maybe you answered back, or someone accused you of stealing a biscuit. Sometimes there's no reason at all. On a bad day, you can get in trouble just for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or for not being invisible enough. Punishments are public. They're designed to make examples. Someone is hauled into the yard, forced to kneel or stretch across a log, and everyone else is made to watch. The sound of leather on skin is something you don't forget. The victim cries out, or worse, goes silent. Afterwards, the rest of you move a little faster, heads down, eyes averted, the fear running through your veins like ice water. It's not just physical pain. It's the threat of humiliation, the knowledge that your suffering is a lesson for everyone else. It's not always the whip, either. Sometimes it's a slap, a shove, or a string of insults loud enough to sting for days. Sometimes the violence is quieter, a missing meal, being forced to work through sickness, or losing the chance to see your children. The mistress has her own weapons, a cold word, a threat to send you to the fields, a punishment that isn't called a punishment but hurts all the same. Survival means learning to read every face and every silence. You watch the overseer's walk, the master's mood, the twitch in the missus's eyebrow. You listen for footsteps in the hallway, or the hush that falls when someone dangerous is near. You become an expert in predicting the weather, emotional weather, that is. If there's tension in the air, you disappear. If tempers are high, you say nothing, do nothing, and try to become as small as possible. But you're not powerless. Resistance is woven into every day, even if it's quiet. Maybe you work a little slower when you can, hide a piece of bread for a friend, or send a warning with a glance. You learn which chores keep you out of sight, which places are safest to hide for a minute or two. Humor helps. Sometimes the only way to keep your sanity is to make a joke as soon as you're out of earshot, mocking the overseer's ridiculous hat or the master's squeaky shoes. It's not much, but it's a crack in the wall. Children grow up fast in this world. They learn when to keep quiet, when to run, and when to hide behind their mother's skirt. You teach them not just how to pick cotton, but how to stay alive, how to move quietly, how to spot danger, and how to take care of each other. Even the smallest acts of kindness are a way to fight back. Proof that you're still human, still capable of more than just suffering. Sometimes, when night falls and you're safe in your cabin, you let yourself breathe for the first time all day. You check on your children, your friends, and yourself, counting bruises and counting blessings. You survived. Tomorrow, you'll have to do it all over again. In a world ruled by violence, your spirit is your shield. You bend, but you don't break. You remember who you are, even when others try to make you forget. And sometimes, that stubborn, quiet survival is the greatest act of defiance there is. One of the cruelest realities is this: your children aren't really yours. Any day could bring a sale, a separation, or a nightmare you can't stop. Still, every hug and lullaby is a quiet act of resistance. You raise your child with love as fierce as anything in the world, even as you live with the constant, gnawing fear that a white-gloved hand could erase everything in an instant. On a southern plantation, the sound of a wagon or a stranger's voice isn't just background noise. It's a potential threat, a warning that change could come fast and merciless. The buying and selling of people is routine business here, as ordinary to the master as trading livestock, as world-ending to you as a hurricane. You memorize every detail: your child's laugh, the way they curl up when they sleep, even the little songs you sing to soothe them after a long day. There's no way to predict when the next sale will be announced. Maybe it's a big auction, the the kind that turns the plantation upside down with noise, commotion, and strangers looking at you like you're nothing but a number. Maybe it's quieter, just a sudden order, a hastily packed bundle, and your child being led away while you bite your lip so hard you taste blood. Desperate not to scream, you hear stories, always whispered, about mothers who hid their children, or pleaded with the master, or tried to run, anything to keep the family together. Sometimes it worked, most of the time it didn't. Even if your child is small, the master sees a price tag, not a person. One day you're tucking them in, and the next you're left with nothing but the memory of their little hands in yours. Saying goodbye is rarely dignified. Maybe you have time for one last embrace, a whispered blessing, or a lullaby you hope they'll remember. Maybe you don't. Sometimes the separation is so sudden you don't have time for anything at all, just the echo of your own voice calling a name that will never answer again. Other times you're told in advance, forced to live through days or weeks of waiting, knowing the clock is running out. The pain is a dull ache at first, then a fire that burns hotter the closer the moment comes. Survival, somehow, goes on. You get through the next hour, and the next, finding ways to carry the memory of your child. You might braid their favorite bead into your hair, or keep a scrap of their old dress tucked in your apron. Some mothers whisper messages to the wind, hoping that somehow their children will hear them across the miles. And yet, even in the darkness, there are moments of fierce, stubborn love. You hold on to rituals, stories, songs, old names, passing them down so your child remembers who they are, even if they're far away. Community steps in too. When a child is taken, neighbors grieve with you, hold you up, and sometimes help raise the children who remain. Love doesn't disappear, even if the people do. It stretches, flexes, becomes as tough as leather, as light as hope. Sometimes, on rare occasions, news travels back. Your child made it to a new place, found family, survived. Maybe one day, against all odds, you'll see them again. It's rare, but hope is a stubborn thing. You tuck it away with the rest of your grief. Because on the plantation, hope is sometimes all you have. The world keeps spinning. The master's work keeps going. But every mother who has lost a child carries an invisible scar, a wound that never fully heals. And every act of love, every song sung in the dark, every name whispered into the night, is an act of quiet rebellion. You remember, you resist, you survive, and you never let the world forget that your child mattered, that you mattered. In a world designed to erase you, loving your child is an act of pure, unbreakable defiance, and even if your arms are empty, your heart is never truly alone. Doctors are for the white folks. You're left with home remedies, prayers, and maybe a neighbor who knows a little about herbs. If you're sick, you work anyway. If you're injured, you hope it heals on its own, or at least doesn't get noticed. On a southern plantation, health isn't something you can take for granted. It's a luxury you hear about, but rarely experience. Your body is your only tool, your only asset, and it's pushed past its limit day after day. There's no clinic, no friendly family doctor, and no sick days. If you get the flu, you sweat it out in the fields. If you twist your ankle, you limp your way through chores and pray nobody notices, because slowing down is a ticket to trouble. Minor aches and pains are part of life. Knees that creak like the cabin door. A cough that never quite goes away. Blisters that turn into calluses and back again. For every ailment, there's a homegrown remedy. A poultice made from onion skins. A tea brewed from wild mint. A salve mixed by moonlight from bacon fat and pine resin. The recipes for these cures aren't written down. They're passed from grandmother to daughter, neighbor to neighbor, a legacy of desperate wisdom and stubborn hope. When someone falls truly ill, the whole cabin takes notice. Maybe it's fever, chills that rattle the bed frame, sweat that soaks through straw. Maybe it's a wound from a tool gone wrong, a gash on the hand, a burn from a kitchen fire. There's no ointment except what you can make, no bandages except what you can rip from an old shirt. You pray over the sick, because sometimes prayer is all you have left. If you're lucky, there's someone on the plantation with a reputation for healing, a woman who knows what roots to boil, which leaves to chew, and how to pull out a splinter with steady hands and a song. There are risks to being known as a healer. Owners get suspicious, fearing talk of root doctors or conjure women. Sometimes a healing gift is a blessing. Other times, it's an accusation, a fast track to punishment if someone gets spooked by your knowledge. But for the enslaved community, that person is a lifeline, a quiet force against a world that wants you weak. Injury is almost guaranteed. A slip with a hoe, a kick from a mule, a careless step into a nest of wasps. You grit your teeth and keep working, because rest is not an option. The most you can hope for is that the wound doesn't fester, that the fever doesn't rise too high, that you won't collapse in the middle of the row and earn a shout, a whip, or worse. Childbirth is another story. No sterile beds, no trained nurses, no gentle reassurances. Women deliver babies in the same cabins where they cook, sleep, and pray. Older women serve as midwives, relying on instinct and experience. Sometimes the mother survives, sometimes she doesn't. Babies are washed with cold water, wrapped in whatever cloth can be spared, and rocked with lullabies that have traveled an ocean. The miracle isn't just in the birth, it's in surviving long enough to see your child grow. Death, when it comes, is as matter of fact as everything else. There are no proper funerals, just quick burials in makeshift graveyards, prayers whispered under your breath, and a handful of dirt tossed into a shallow hole. If you're lucky, your friends and family gather at night to sing, to remember, to keep your memory alive in a world that wants so badly to forget. Yet, in spite of everything, healing still happens. A hand held through fever, a song sung through pain, a scrap of hope passed like medicine from one heart to another. You find comfort where you can, in an elder's advice, in the cool shade of a tree, in the laughter that somehow bubbles up even when your body aches. So you carry on, patched up and stitched together by faith, by community, and by the knowledge that sometimes survival itself is the strongest medicine of all. Healthcare here isn't about cures. It's about resilience, resourcefulness, and a refusal to give in, no matter how many times the world tries to knock you down. Not all resistance looks like running away. Sometimes it's forgetting a chore, hiding food, or swapping gossip the overseer would hate. Survival is a chess game, and you're always 2 moves ahead, or at least trying to be. You might think of resistance as some grand act, a midnight escape, a dramatic confrontation, or a rebellion that shakes the ground. And yes, those things happened. But on a southern plantation, defiance is mostly a daily, quiet business, woven into the fabric of ordinary life. For enslaved women, resistance is about small, clever acts that the master will never write down in his ledger, but that everyone in the cabins knows by heart. Take, for instance, the lost bucket. Maybe you're supposed to haul water to the big house, but the bucket has a mysterious hole today, and water just doesn't travel as fast as it should. Maybe you drag your feet in the field when the overseer's back is turned, or you swap jobs with a friend so your sister can catch her breath. It's not much, but every minute stolen from a day of forced labor is a tiny victory. Food is another front in the resistance. You might tuck away a biscuit, slip an extra turnip in your apron, or scrape up the last bit of molasses when nobody's looking. Maybe it's a handful of seeds slipped into a pocket, seeds you'll plant in secret behind your cabin, hoping to grow just enough to add flavor to the bland monotony of plantation meals. The taste of something you grew yourself is sweeter than sugar, and twice as satisfying. Words are weapons too. Gossip is traded like currency. News about the master's mood, the overseer's schedule, or warnings about a new buyer in town. Information is survival, and the right rumor can save a friend from trouble or give someone a moment's head start. Laughter, too, is resistance. Jokes about the master's toupee, the missus's dreadful singing, or the overseer's habit of tripping over his own boots. They're not just for fun. They're a way to take back a sliver of power, to remind everyone that you're still thinking, still alive. Teaching children to read, to write, or even just to count is another act of rebellion. Education is forbidden, but the alphabet is whispered over laundry, numbers traced in the dust, and stories about heroes and ancestors passed down like heirlooms. Every lesson is a risk, but it's also a seed planted for a future nobody else can see yet. Music is an entire language of defiance. Work songs keep the rhythm in the fields, but can hide warnings or messages in their verses. Spirituals, with their double meanings, speak of crossing the Jordan or finding freedom, all while sounding innocuous to the overseer's ear. Singing together builds unity, drowns out despair, and sometimes even signals the start of a plan. Even the way you care for each other is resistance. You share what little you have. A bit of soap, a patch of cloth, an hour's rest watching someone else's child. You help elders with their chores, bandage a friend's blistered hands, or sneak medicine to someone who's sick. This mutual care isn't just kindness. It's an insistence on humanity in a system built to erase it. And yes, sometimes the resistance is bigger. Maybe someone sneaks out at night to meet with people plotting escape, or helps a plotting escape friend find the path north. Maybe someone dares to speak up, to say no, to take a punishment so someone else won't have to. These acts are dangerous and rare, but they grow out of the daily, ordinary defiance that comes from living every day on your own terms, even when those terms are limited. So, when you forget to finish a chore or share a secret laugh, you're not just surviving, you're fighting back. Each small act is a reminder to yourself and your community. They can order you around, but they can't truly break you. Resistance is everywhere, in every corner of the plantation, and every day you make it through is proof that you're still 2 moves ahead, or at least trying to be, and that, sometimes, is enough. Night doesn't mean safety. You might worry about patrols, wild animals, or the possibility of being called up to the big house for reasons nobody talks about out loud. Sleep is never quite safe, and dreams are a luxury. On a southern plantation, darkness falls, fast and thick, blanketing everything in a kind of uneasy silence that's more nerve-wracking than restful. You'd think the end of a grueling day would bring some comfort, maybe even a little relief, but when the sun dips behind the trees, a new set of dangers wake up, ready to turn any hope of peace into a round-the-clock game of survival. First, there are the patrols, white men on horseback, armed and bored, whose only job is to make sure you stay exactly where you're supposed to be. Their footsteps crunch in the leaves, the dogs bark at shadows, and every snap of a twig outside your cabin makes your heart jump. It's like having a security system with a personal vendetta, except you're not the one being protected, you're the one being watched. You learn to recognize which nights the patrol is extra mean, which ones are sleepy, and when it's safest to sneak a quick word with your neighbor at the well. Inside the cabins, safety is mostly a wish. You bolt the door if you have one, or shove a bench in front of it if you don't. But locks are flimsy, and everyone knows that a determined hand from the big house can open any door at any hour for any reason. If you're called to the big house after dark, nobody asks why. The questions hang in the air, heavy as the humidity, but the answers are always whispered, if at all. You move quickly, keep your head down, and hope for the best, knowing that sometimes the worst does happen. You pray it won't be your turn tonight. And then there are the wild things, the creatures that roam the fields after midnight. Foxes, raccoons, maybe even a stray panther if the stories are true. The sounds outside can be terrifying if you don't know what they are. But, honestly, most people worry more about the two-legged threats than the four-legged ones. The woods can swallow a person whole, but so can a rumor or a grudge carried by someone with power. Sleep is no simple thing. You settle down with the rest of your family, squeezed together on straw pallets or ragged blankets. The day's aches still buzzing through your bones. Every sound feels sharper, every whisper seems to carry twice as far. You keep an ear out for children coughing, for elders stirring in their sleep, and for the sudden, urgent voices that mean trouble. If you do manage to sleep, your dreams are always on edge. Half rest, half listening, a sleep shaped by vigilance. Children learn young that night is not their friend. They ask questions about monsters under the bed, and you give them gentle answers, never mentioning the monsters who walk on two legs and carry torches. You teach them to stay inside after dark, to keep quiet, and never to answer a knock on the door unless they know the voice. If they're lucky, they'll outgrow some fears. Others they'll carry for life. Still, the darkness is sometimes a space for secret kindness. Hushed songs and whispered prayers travel softly from cabin to cabin. Neighbors pass. Messages, share stories, or sneak bites of hidden food. There's a strange sort of comfort in knowing that, even in fear, you're not alone. The community that kept you upright during the day becomes your shield at night. Woven tight with whispered reassurance and the soft sounds of people breathing close by. And so, you lie there, eyes adjusting to the moonlight slanting through the cracks, heart beating a little faster than it should, waiting for morning. Night on the plantation isn't restful. It's just a different kind of struggle, a quieter, lonelier one. But if you make it through to dawn, that's a victory all its own. And sometimes, that's enough to keep you holding on for one more day. Still, there's laughter. Sometimes it's dark, sometimes it's wild, but it's always there, mocking the absurdity of it all. If you can't joke about the chickens, the overseer's hairpiece, or your own aching feet, what's the point? Here's a secret they don't put in the history books. Even in the worst circumstances, humor doesn't just survive, it thrives. On a southern plantation, joy is a form of resistance, a breath of fresh air in a place that does everything it can to suffocate you. If misery loves company, then laughter is its stubborn twin, always sneaking in the back door, with muddy feet and a wide grin. It starts early, maybe over the morning fire, while someone is wrestling cornbread out of a sticky pan and someone else is trying to wrangle a child with hair that refuses to be tamed. Someone cracks a joke about the rooster that crows off-beat, or the goat who thinks it's a dog. There's always some wise soul ready with a comeback, the kind that sends a ripple of laughter through the whole cabin before the first spoonful of porridge is even dished out. Throughout the day, the humor keeps rolling. You swap jokes in the field, quick and quiet, so the overseer won't hear. There are nicknames for everyone, sometimes sweet, sometimes a little too accurate. The master's hat, perched at a gravity-defying angle, becomes the punchline of a dozen one-liners. If the mistress trips on her own skirts, you save the story for later, retelling it so many times it becomes legend, complete with dramatic reenactments. There's the kind of laughter that comes from simple pleasures, a song sung off-key, a child's unexpected comment, the sight of a piglet making a break for freedom across the yard. And then there's the dark humor, the stuff that bubbles up when you've been up since before dawn and your back is one big knot. You laugh because you have to, because the alternative is to let the sadness swallow you whole. Laughter on the plantation isn't just about funny stories, though. It's a glue, holding people together when the world is trying to pull them apart. You laugh to let off steam, to share the weight, to remind each other that you're more than just the sum of your suffering. It's a sign that, for all the pain, you haven't lost yourself or your sense of the absurd. And let's be real. Sometimes the humor is sharp. It pokes fun at the people in charge, at the ridiculous rules, at the sheer unfairness of it all. There's something wonderfully subversive about finding a joke in the master's latest tantrum, or the overseer's new boots that squeak with every step. It's risky, sure, but it's also empowering, turning fear into something that can be mocked, even if it's just for a moment. Even children pick it up. They turn chores into games, mimic the grown-ups' grumbles in high-pitched voices, or play pranks on each other with mud pies and hidden frogs. Laughter is handed down alongside work songs and old stories, becoming a family heirloom tougher than any piece of furniture in the big house. Nighttime is when the humor really comes alive. After the chores are done and the little ones are drifting off, the grown-ups finally have a minute to breathe and to tease, gossip, and relive the day's best and worst moments. There's something about a room full of people laughing quietly in the dark, sharing stories with their heads bent close together, that feels almost sacred. For a few precious moments, the world outside disappears. So, no, joy doesn't erase the pain, but it puts it in its place, at least for a while. Every joke is proof that you're still human, still present, still fighting back in your own way. In a world that demands your silence, laughter is your loudest answer. If you can keep finding ways to smile, no matter how small, no matter how sly, then you've won something real. And sometimes, in the hardest places, that's what keeps you going. Music is everywhere. Work songs, lullabies, secret spirituals hummed in the fields. Every note is a protest, a prayer, or a reminder that nobody can own your voice. On the plantation, music slips through the cracks, under doorways, through the walls of cabins, and out into the rows of cotton and corn. It's not something you do just for fun. It's as necessary as breathing. When words fail, when tears sting too much, you sing. And when the day gets too heavy to carry, a good song helps lighten the load, if only for a few minutes. Every morning, music starts before breakfast. You might hum a tune as you tie a headscarf or coax a sleepy child out of bed. Songs are woven into the rhythms of the day. A quick verse here, a full chorus there. Sometimes nothing more than a bit of melody rising up as naturally as the Sunday. The old folks know all the verses, and even the babies babble along, picking up snatches of song before they've learned to walk. Work in the fields has its own soundtrack. You and the women beside you fall into a rhythm, not just with your hands but with your voices. The call and response style, one person singing out, everyone else answering back, turns picking cotton into something almost bearable. It's more than just background noise. It's a code, a way to send messages without the overseer ever catching on. Maybe you warn about trouble coming down the row. Maybe you count out the beats, making sure everyone keeps pace. Sometimes you slip in a joke, a bit of gossip, or a wish for rain. Every note is layered with meaning. Some songs are playful and light, designed to help pass the hours. Others are heavy with longing and hope, spirituals about freedom, about crossing rivers and finding rest. Wade in the water, swing low, sweet chariot. These aren't just songs, they're lifelines, carrying secrets and prayers across the fields, from one set of aching hands to another. To an outsider, it might sound like music. To you, it's a roadmap. A secret language that keeps you connected to everyone around you and to your own soul. At night, music takes on a softer, more secret shape. In the hush of the cabin, you sing lullabies, old melodies brought from Africa or invented on this strange new land. Mothers soothe their children with stories set to music, legends of clever animals, ancestors who survived the impossible, or dreams of a better world. Even the elders, worn out from the day, hum softly to themselves as they sit by the door, weaving music into the fabric of evening. There are the forbidden gatherings, too. After dark, if it's safe, you join others in a hush arbor or a clearing by the river. Someone starts to sing, and voices join one by one, building something so strong it almost feels like a shield. These gatherings are risky, patrols could be nearby, and punishment for unauthorized meetings is swift and cruel. But for a few stolen minutes, you're free. You sing as loud as you dare, feeling the music vibrate in your bones, filling up the empty places the world tries to carve out. In the big house, music is work, singing while serving dinner, or playing the piano if you're lucky enough to have been taught. But even there, you sneak in your own notes, hiding a bit of yourself in every song, making sure your voice is heard. Even if nobody's really listening, music is protest, comfort, memory, and resistance. When your voice joins with others, it's a promise. We are still here. We remember who we are, and we will not be silent. You might not own anything else in this world, but your song is yours, forever. And no matter how hard the world tries, it can't take that away. History isn't written in books here. It's whispered at night, carved into memory. Elders tell tales of Africa, of freedom, or just of last week's drama. It's the only inheritance nobody can take. On the plantation, stories are survival. Every evening, after the sun sets and the day's aches settle in, people gather close, on porches, by fires, or inside crowded cabins to listen. The world outside might try to erase your past, but inside this little circle of voices, memory lives on, kept alive by those who refuse to forget. You don't have a written record, no dusty library or shelf of blank for Lease Pond family albums. Instead, history is living, breathing, and always just one generation away from disappearing, unless you keep it going. The elders are the memory keepers. Their words are as precious as gold and twice as rare. With a slow, steady cadence, they tell the old stories of the crossing, of the time before bondage, of mothers and fathers who braved the ocean with nothing but hope in their hearts. Maybe they describe great rivers and green forests on the other side of the world, places so different from this red dirt and Spanish moss that it almost sounds like a dream. Maybe they speak in a language you only half understand, but the meaning runs deep, threading the past to the present like a secret string. Not every story is ancient. Some are only a day old, a neighbor's narrow escape, a new baby's first laugh, the latest gossip about who got caught sneaking an extra biscuit from the kitchen. These tales are reminders that even in a world built to break spirits, people still find ways to live, to love, and to find joy. You listen, you laugh, and you learn because every story contains a lesson. How to hide, how to hope, how to fight back, and how to keep moving forward. Children crowd close, wide-eyed, and hungry for every word. They know these tales by heart before they can even tie their shoes. The best storytellers can make a child believe that a broomstick is a horse, that a rooster is a messenger, that a stubborn mule is the hero of its own adventure. With each story, children learn where they come from, and maybe, just maybe, where they're going. Sometimes the stories are about loss, a mother or brother sold away, an elder who didn't make it through the winter. These stories hurt, but they're important. They're how people remember the ones who are gone, keeping them close in a world determined to pull families apart. Each time a name is spoken, a face is described, a habit or laugh recalled. The lost are brought back for a moment, held safe by memory. Some stories are warnings too. The elders teach how to read signs in the weather, how to avoid the overseer's worst moods, how to make medicine from wild plants. These lessons are vital, passed along in hushed tones with a seriousness that says, "This knowledge could save your life." And sometimes, the stories are about freedom, tales of runaways who followed the North Star, of secret meetings in the woods, of codes hidden in quilts or sung in songs. These are the stories that keep hope alive, that remind you that today's suffering is not the end, that somewhere, somehow, life can be different. As the fire burns low and the night grows quiet, you carry these memories with you. They become armor against despair, fuel for resilience, proof that you are more than what the world tries to make you. You are part of a line of survivors, each one passing the torch to the next. So you keep telling the stories. You whisper them to your children, share them with your neighbors, hold them close when the world gets cold. Because history here isn't something you read, it's something you live, something you save, and something you make sure will never be forgotten. Summer is sweaty, bug-filled misery. Winter is cold, damp misery. Your wardrobe doesn't change, but your strategies do. Every season is a new boss fight. Let's start with summer, which arrives in the south like an overcooked slap to the face. The days are long, the sun is relentless, and you're working outside no matter how high the temperature climbs. The humidity turns every chore into a full-body sauna. And by noon, your dress is sticking to your skin like old wallpaper. Shade is precious and rare. If you're lucky, you find a sliver under a scrawny tree during a water break. But mostly you learn to live with sweat trickling down your back and into places best left unnamed. Bugs are everywhere. Mosquitoes treat you like a buffet. Gnats swarm your face the second you break a sweat, and flies are as relentless as the overseer on a bad day. No bug spray, no citronella candles, just frantic swatting, swearing under your breath, and an ever-present soundtrack of buzzing in your ears. If you sleep with a window open, you might as well hang a sign that says, "All you can eat." Even the chickens get cranky. And then there's the heat in the cabins. The air inside is as still as a secret. No fans, no cross breeze, just the slow, suffocating crawl of air so thick you could chew it. You try propping the door with a stick or fanning yourself with the nearest thing you can find, a bonnet, a hand, an old piece of cardboard. But relief is temporary at best. Night brings little comfort, just a different kind of discomfort. Sticky and sleepless, where you drift in and out listening to the chorus of frogs, crickets, and someone in the next bed, snoring with heroic determination. If you think winter is a break, think again. The cold seeps through the cracks in the cabin walls, through your one thin dress, through every bone and muscle already tired from summer's labor. There's no wardrobe change, no cozy sweaters or woolen socks. If you have a shawl, you're ahead of the game. If not, you double up with whatever you can find, an extra skirt, a worn-out scarf, or just the warmth of another body huddled close. The fireplace is both friend and foe. If you can keep a fire going, you might manage a patch of warmth in the center of the room. But wood is hard to come by, and rationed for the big house first. Sometimes you burn whatever will catch, a handful of twigs, dried cornstalks, or the ends of broken furniture that nobody will miss. The smoke stings your eyes, but it's better than freezing. Frost turns the ground outside to stone, and every barefoot trip to the outhouse or to fetch water feels like walking on frozen nails. You try to keep your feet dry, but sometimes the only socks you have are last summer's rags, patched and repatched until they're more whole than cloth. The cold is something you carry to bed, curling up tight with family, breathing out clouds that hang in the air, like ghostly reminders of what warmth used to feel like. Seasons don't care about your aches, your plans, or your patience. Every shift in the weather brings new headaches. Summer brings heat stroke, sunburn, and thunderstorms that flood your cabin. Winter brings chilblains, colds, and joints. So stiff you start measuring your age by how loudly you groan when you stand up. But you adapt, invent, and endure. Maybe you cool off in the creek after work. Maybe you learn to make a quilt from scraps. Or maybe you just laugh at the absurdity of fighting Mother Nature in a dress you've been wearing since last year. One thing never changes: the work. The fields don't pause for the weather, and neither does the overseer. But somehow, you make it through, season after season, boss fight after boss fight, armed with nothing but determination, a stubborn sense of humor, and the knowledge that, one way or another, you'll see the world turn green again, and when it does, you'll be ready, sunburned, frostbitten, but undefeated. Pregnancy is dangerous, often uncelebrated, and always complicated. There's no privacy, little rest, and the looming fear that something, anything, could go wrong. On the plantation, pregnancy isn't a sacred journey marked with gifts and glowing compliments. It's another layer of worry, a new set of risks in a world already brimming with hazards. For an enslaved woman, finding out you're pregnant can stir up a tangle of emotions: fear, hope, anxiety, and sometimes just a heavy sigh. There's no time for baby showers or knitting tiny hats, just more chores to juggle, more pain to carry. Your body changes, but your workload doesn't. Whether you're in the fields, kitchen, or big house, pregnancy doesn't buy you a break. You keep hauling water, scrubbing floors, lifting heavy pots, and planting or picking cotton until you physically can't. If you slow down, someone notices, and not in a caring way. The overseer is more likely to bark at you to hurry up than to ask if you're feeling dizzy. You learn to hide your aches, swallow your complaints, and hope you can make it through another day without something bad happening. Privacy is a myth. If you're lucky, an older woman or two will help shield you, offering advice and covering for you when the work gets too much. But there's nowhere to go to be alone, no place to rest and let your body catch up. The cabins are crowded, and every cough, wince, or whisper of pain is overheard. You worry about the eyes in the big house too, because a new pregnancy could mean you or your child is worth more money. And that's never a comforting thought. The risk is everywhere. Medical care, as you know, is a privilege for someone else. You rely on the knowledge passed down from mother to daughter, neighbor to neighbor. Which teas to drink, which roots to chew, how to bind your belly for support. There are rituals, rubbing salves, praying certain prayers, tying bits of red cloth for protection, and singing lullabies to unborn babies to comfort them and yourself. The community steps up as much as it can, sharing advice and superstitions with the kind of seriousness you'd expect from a royal court. Labor is something you face with dread and determination. There's no doctor unless you're in crisis, and then, only if it's in the owner's financial interest. More often, a midwife from among the enslaved women will come when the time comes. She brings hot water, rags, herbs, and a calm voice. She's seen it all, survived it herself, and if anyone can pull you through, it's her. Still, childbirth is a lottery. So many things can go wrong. Breech birth, fever, hemorrhage, or just sheer exhaustion. There's no anesthesia, no sterile tools, just faith, experience, and the hands of women who care about to you more than anyone else possibly could. If the baby comes healthy, the first breath is a small miracle. If not, grief is silent and swift. There's work to be done, other children to care for, chores that won't wait for heartbreak. You bury loss deep because there's no time or space for mourning, not the way you'd want, not the way you deserve. Naming a baby is its own quiet act of hope. Sometimes you choose a name from Africa, or from a beloved ancestor, or even a word that means freedom in another language. It's your way of giving your child something the world can't take. The first lullaby, the first touch, the first whispered prayer. These are the rituals that matter. Pregnancy here is a mixture of anxiety and stubborn faith. You hope for health, for survival, for a future you can't guarantee. And when you wrap your child in a scrap of old cloth and cradle them close, you promise, as mothers always do, to fight for them with everything you have, even in a world that gives you almost nothing at all. Reading is forbidden, but that doesn't stop everyone from trying. Stories, words, and even basic letters are precious, hoarded, and shared in whispers. On the plantation, a book is more than just paper and ink. It's a dangerous, subversive object. The mere idea of literacy is enough to put the whole white population on edge. Laws forbid it, punishments threaten it, and overseers are always on the lookout for troublemakers who seem a little too curious about what's written on a page. But where there's a will and a whisper, there's a way. The hunger to read and write doesn't start with a school bell. It starts with a need to know, to connect, and to hope for something bigger. Maybe you notice that the master's children have lessons every morning in the parlor, tracing letters while you're sweeping around their feet. Maybe you catch sight of a Bible or a label on a barrel, and you wonder what those shapes mean. The urge to understand is a flame, and on the plantation, even the smallest spark is worth protecting. Lessons, when they happen, are quick, quiet, and careful. An older woman who knows her letters might sneak you a few at a time, tracing the alphabet into the dust behind the cabins or using a stick to draw words in a hidden corner of the yard. Every letter learned is a tiny rebellion. You memorize them fast, because there's never time to linger. If the wrong person walks by, you brush away the lesson with your foot and switch the conversation to something safe. Cooking, the weather, the latest rumors. Reading, if you can manage it, opens doors to the world. Maybe you decipher a hymn book or piece together words from an old newspaper left behind in the big house. Sometimes, someone passes along a scrap of Bible verse, copied by hand and hidden in a bundle of rags. You read it aloud by candlelight, the words soft as a secret and just as powerful. To be able to read is to see your own mind reflected in the written word. It means you're more than what the Master says you are. It means you have a chance to shape your future, even if it's just in your imagination. Writing is even riskier. If you manage to get hold of a pencil stub or a bit of chalk, you might practice your name over and over, carving it into a scrap of wood or the underside of your bunk. Letters are lifelines for families separated by sail. Short, coded notes sent up and down the river, carried by friends, hidden in shoes or hems. You keep them short, you use nicknames and riddles, and you never, ever get caught. Of course, it's not just about reading for yourself. Once you know, you teach. Passing on your knowledge is a duty, a way to fight back against the darkness that ignorance brings. The youngest kids learn fast, hungry for any bit of forbidden knowledge. Sometimes you teach them old stories, just to keep the memory alive. Sometimes you teach them letters, knowing that every child who learns is one more spark of hope for the future. The risks are real. Punishments for learning or teaching can be brutal. A beating, a sale, worse. But the dream of literacy is stubborn, and the rewards are too great to ignore. A learned mind can't be chained, no matter how many laws are passed or how many eyes are watching. And so, you keep learning, keep teaching, keep passing scraps of paper and fragments of poems like treasure. Knowledge becomes a hidden network, a web of hope strung across the cabins, stretching farther than anyone on the outside will ever know. At the end of the day, you tuck your secrets away, letters in your heart, words on the tip of your tongue, stories ready to pass on when the time is right. Because in a world built on silence and ignorance, every new word learned is a step toward freedom. And that's a journey worth risking everything for. The overseer is less a person and more a walking bad day. Every encounter is a test. Can you answer right, move fast, and, to avoid attention, it's a daily performance, and the stakes are always high. On a southern plantation, the overseer is the unofficial master of disaster, stomping through the fields and the cabins, wielding more power than anyone deserves and using it like a child uses a hammer, indiscriminately, and with maximum noise. He's the one person you can't ever predict, and that's exactly what makes him so dangerous. He sets the tempo for every hour, louder, meaner, faster, and if you're unlucky, your day starts with his voice and ends with his shadow. Every morning, before your feet even hit the dirt, you're already thinking about how to read his mood. Is he in a yelling kind of mood? Or is he trying out quiet and menacing today? You notice the set of his jaw, the way he holds his stick, how much he's already sweating. The plantation's entire energy shifts depending on how the overseer decides to carry himself. Your survival plan? Blend in. Don't stand out. Move just fast. Enough to look busy, but not so fast he thinks you're hiding something. The overseer's rules are a riddle with no answer. Sometimes he wants a job done slow and careful. Other times he wants it done yesterday. He'll bark orders, then punish you for following them too literally. There are days when nothing makes sense. He'll tell you to pick more cotton but complain if you bring in too many stems. He'll shout at you for talking, then demand to know why you're so quiet. Every interaction is like playing chess against an opponent who keeps changing the rules and moving your pieces when you aren't looking. And it's not just about getting through the day. It's about protecting the people around you, your friends, your family, your children. If you see the overseer heading towards someone who's struggling, you try to help without getting caught. If you hear that he's looking for volunteers for the hardest chores, you duck your head and hope he chooses someone else. Sometimes, it feels like every moment is a gamble. Speak up and you might get punished. Stay silent and someone else might pay the price. Humor becomes a secret weapon, a way to cope with the stress. When the overseer trips on a root or gets his hat blown off by the wind, the whole field shares a silent grin. Later, you'll retell the story a dozen different ways, each version more dramatic than the last. It's a little spark of defiance, because sometimes the only power you have is the ability to laugh at someone who thinks he's in charge of everything. But the danger is always real. The overseer's punishments aren't just threats. They're a part of life, handed out for reasons that shift with the weather. A missed task, a wrong answer, a look he doesn't like. And suddenly, you're the target. The whip isn't just for show. Neither are the insults, the threats, or the extra long work hours handed out as punishment. Sometimes, you wonder if he ever sees you as a person at crate, or if you're just another tool to be worn out and replaced. But you also know that you're more than what he sees. You find ways to push back, to hide a little joy in your day, to help your neighbors, and to remind yourself that the overseer may control your schedule, but not your spirit. At the end of the day, you check in with the people you care about, swap stories, compare bruises, and count the small mercies. The overseer's power ends where your humanity begins. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again, navigating his moods and rules with the same stubborn resilience. Because out here, survival isn't just about dodging the overseer's wrath. It's about holding on to every scrap of dignity and hope you can find. Even here, people dream of freedom, family, or just a day without fear. Some make plans, some pray, some just survive. Hope is hard to kill even here. No matter how tight the overseer's grip, how harsh the master's words, or how endless the days feel, there's something inside you that refuses to give up. Call it stubbornness, faith, or just a deeply rooted sense that life could be different. It starts as a whisper, a story heard from a neighbor, or passed quietly from cabin to cabin. Someone, somewhere, made it out. Someone followed the river, hid in the woods, and reached a place where nobody called them property anymore. Sometimes, the dream is big. A vision of crossing into the north, of seeing snow for the first time, of picking your own path with no one standing over you. Maybe you imagine being reunited with a child or a husband who was sold away years ago, or simply having a home where you can lock the door and know that nobody will ever barge in and change your life with a single word. These aren't just idle daydreams. They're lifelines. They're the reason you keep putting one foot in front of the other. The reason you bite your tongue instead of screaming. The reason you keep going even when your back aches and your spirit feels worn thin. Escape isn't just about running. It's 1,000 small acts of hope every day. Maybe you save a crumb of food, stash away a scrap of cloth, or learn to read the stars when you fetch water late at night. Maybe you listen extra closely to the old man who's been here since before you were born. The one who knows every stream, every path through the woods, and every hiding place on the edge of the plantation. Or maybe you just keep watch for a sign. A new moon, a cloudy night, a rumor that the patrols are drunk and slow this week. And then there's prayer. For every person who makes plans, there's another who hopes for a miracle. You pray for the strength to last, for a chance to change, for someone to come along and show you the way. Faith is a form of escape too, a way to survive when you can't see a way out. Stories of runaways are retold with a reverence usually reserved for saints. Harriet Tubman, the Moses of her people, becomes a legend, proof that it can be done. Songs carry secret meanings. Follow the Drinking Gourd isn't just a tune. It's a map, a coded promise that someone, somewhere, is waiting to help you get free. Even if you're not planning to leave, you hold these stories close, because they prove that the world isn't as small as the plantation's fence line. Of course, escape is dangerous. Getting caught means whippings, punishment, or worse. Sometimes, people who try to run are brought back as a warning to everyone else. The risk is so high that just dreaming of escape feels rebellious. But sometimes, hope overpowers fear, and you find yourself rehearsing routes in your mind as you fall asleep, memorizing stars and listening for the sound of distant dogs. Most of the time, the dream lives quietly inside you, tucked away for safekeeping. It shows up in a look, a song, a promise whispered to a child at bedtime, one day we'll be free. Even those who never leave the plantation, who never set foot beyond the boundaries set for them, keep the hope alive, passing it down like a hidden inheritance. In the end, dreams of escape are about more than just leaving. They're about believing in a life beyond chains, about holding on to the spark of possibility that nobody, not even the overseer, can crush. Hope, here, is the strongest resistance of all. And as long as people dream, the story isn't over. As the sky darkens, you count your blessings and your bruises. You made it through another day, laughing, working, scheming, loving. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Because giving up is simply not an option. There's a strange kind of peace that settles in with the dusk. The kind you only find after a day that wrings you out like an old dish rag. The worst of the day's noise fades, the overseer's shouts, the clang of the bell, the constant grind of chores. You take a moment to listen to the night sounds, crickets, frogs, the low murmur of your neighbors swapping stories. Somewhere, a baby fusses. Someone else is humming. The world is, if not quiet, at least softer. You stretch sore arms and rub your aching back. And maybe, if you're lucky, you find a spare minute to sit down. It's not a fancy seat, just a step, a log, or maybe the edge of your own straw mattress. But for now, it's enough. You take stock. What did you get through today? Maybe you patched a dress, nursed a sick child, or managed to grab an extra spoonful of beans at dinner. Maybe you slipped a joke into a hard moment, or found a way to share a laugh with a friend. Survival here is measured in small wins, the little triumphs nobody else would ever notice. Night is also the time when you finally let your guard down a little. The big house is quiet, the patrols are far off, and the work is done for now. You can whisper secrets, tell stories, or just sit in comfortable silence with people who know exactly what you're feeling. The worries don't go away. Tomorrow's work, the aches that never leave, the fear of what might happen to someone you love. But you let yourself rest, just for a while, because you need to gather your strength for whatever comes next. You reflect on what you're grateful for: a patch of moonlight, a cool breeze through the window, or the comfort of knowing your children are sleeping close by. Sometimes, gratitude is a stubborn thing. You give thanks not because life is easy, but because, in spite of everything, you're still here. You haven't been broken by the endless rules, the violence, the heartbreak. You've found ways to hold on to laughter, love, and hope, even when the world tries its hardest to strip them away. There's wisdom that settles in with the dark, too. You remember what the elders say. We've seen worse and survived. We'll see better someday. You remind yourself that everything you do, every song, every story, every bit of kindness, keeps the past alive and the future possible. You think of the children, watching, learning, soaking up every word. They are your reason, your legacy, your hope. If you have time before sleep, you trade a few more words with your neighbors, check on an elder, or hum a lullaby into the quiet. Sometimes you pray for safety, for peace, for something better. Sometimes you just listen to the night, letting the world spin on while you gather yourself for another round. You know tomorrow will bring the same battles, more work, more aches, more moments where you have to fight for your dignity, your laughter, your soul. But for tonight, you let yourself rest in the knowledge that you made it. You survived. You even found ways to live, really live, between all the hard parts. And that, in this place, is the truest kind of victory. As your eyes close, you hold on to the memories of the day's small kindnesses, the stolen moments of joy, and the quiet hope that one day Sunset will mean true freedom. But for now, sleep. Tomorrow is another day. And you'll rise to meet it, no matter what it brings. It's not just the master you have to watch out for. The mistress of the house, known as the Missus, is a whole other weather system. 1 minute, she's asking you to starch the curtains for the 3rd time this week. The next, she's suspicious you're stealing her soap. Spoiler. You're not, because it's awful anyway. Pleasing her is like trying to iron a shirt during a tornado. Risky, exhausting, and rarely successful. If you've ever worked customer service, you'll fit right in. Navigating life under the watchful eye of the plantation mistress is a study in unpredictability. She might glide into the parlor all sweet-voiced and smiling, and by the time you've dusted the last shelf, she's transformed into a storm cloud in a hoop skirt. She is judge, jury, and, when she feels like it, the self-appointed queen of etiquette. She manages the big house with an iron hand wrapped in a lace glove, expecting every inch to gleam and every servant to anticipate her needs before she's even had her morning coffee, or, let's be real, her third. For enslaved women working inside, the Missus is your boss, your critic, and your source of endless stress. She's a master of the backhanded compliment. The "Are you sure you cleaned this?" and the "Why does my handkerchief not smell like roses?" interrogations. She'll task you with impossible jobs, like making sure the silver shines in candlelight, or removing mud stains from the master's trousers with nothing but a prayer and some old soap. Her favorite phrase? Do it again. If you ever wanted to experience déjà vu, just watch her inspect the linens. She'll find a new flaw every time, guaranteed. Her standards shift with the wind. Sometimes she wants you invisible, gliding around like a ghost. Sometimes she needs an audience, someone to listen to her complaints about the weather, the neighbors, or her own husband's snoring. You quickly learn to nod in all the right places, to say "yes, ma'am," with just the right mix of respect and exhaustion. Arguing isn't just a bad idea. It's a ticket to extra chores, sharper words, and, if she's in a truly foul mood, a trip back to the fields. Then there's the household soap opera. The Missus is convinced you're plotting to outshine her, or even worse, out-organize her kitchen. Heaven help you if anything goes missing, because you'll be accused of theft long before anyone checks whether her son left the spoon in the garden. Again, if the biscuits burn, it's your fault for not watching the oven. If the garden looks shabby, you should have weeded faster. Even if you were sewing her dress at the same time. Yet, in her own way, the Missus is as much a prisoner of the system as anyone else, just one with fancier clothes and more power to ruin your day. She's caught up in appearances, forever competing with other plantation wives for who has the cleanest lace, the whitest sheets, and the best-behaved servants. Her own life is a tightrope walk, balancing social calls, strict rules, and the ever-present need to keep up with the neighbors. But you see things she never will. The ways women help each other survive. The silent eye rolls behind her back. The passing of news and comfort when her voice fades into the next room. The kitchen is your territory, and the other housewomen are your allies, sometimes covering for each other, sometimes sharing a laugh, very quietly, about the Missus and her endless list of pet peeves. At the end of the day, after a dozen rounds of do it over and not good enough, you still find moments to breathe. Maybe you manage a perfect fold on her favorite dress, or maybe you just get through without losing your patience. Either way, you know the secret. Pleasing the Missus is impossible, but surviving her is an art form. And if you can do that, you can do just about anything, except, maybe, find a bar of soap worth stealing. Technically, Sunday is your day off. But it's the kind of rest where you still have to show up. You dress in your cleanest rags, herd children to the white folks' church, and try not to nod off during a sermon about obedience. Afterward, you might get a moment to pray in peace, or at least swap recipes for the world's blandest biscuits. Call it spiritual multitasking. The idea of a day of rest sounds nice, until you realize that rest is more of a rumor than a real event on the plantation. Sunday morning means a different routine, but it's still a routine. You get up early, scrub children's faces, patch up your own dress, and hope nobody notices the mud stains you just couldn't get out. There's no sleeping in. If anything, there's more fussing and rushing as everyone tries to look their best for the master and missus. You line up outside the cabins, kids tugging at sleeves and grown-ups, checking each other for runaway bits of hay in their hair. Then, it's the long walk up to the big house where the master and his family wait for the weekly spectacle of respectable servants. The church is sometimes just the parlor, sometimes a tiny white building down the road. Either way, you take a spot in the back, as far from the fancy pews as possible, making sure the little ones stay quiet, good luck, and the older ones don't start giggling at the wrong moment. The service itself is long. The preacher, sometimes a traveling pastor, sometimes the master himself, stands up front and delivers a sermon that sounds suspiciously like the rules you hear all week, just dressed up with more these and thous. Obedience, patience, and knowing your place are the topics of the day, with a few hymns thrown in for good measure. You sing along quietly, careful not to show too much spirit. That's frowned upon, but humming just enough to keep your mind from wandering all the way back to the laundry pile. If you're lucky, the missus will pass out a scrap of cake or a few coins for good behavior, though you suspect it's really a test to see who minds their manners. After church, you herd everyone back to the cabins, letting out a sigh of relief that only grows louder once you're out of sight of the big house. For a few precious minutes, you might have actual free time. Some people nap, some catch up on repairs, and others gather for real worship. A prayer circle in a clearing, a hidden hymn sung in the woods, a whispered story about survival and hope. This is the real soul of Sunday, a chance to connect with your community on your own terms. Someone might lead a song, someone else might recite a Bible verse from memory, and for a moment, you feel the weight of the week lift, replaced by something softer, something like peace. You swap stories, advice, and maybe a little gentle gossip about who made the best biscuits or who nearly tripped over their own feet during the hymn. It's not much, but it's yours. There's work, too, because there's always work. Maybe you catch up on mending or take the chance to sweep out the cabin. Kids chase each other in the yard. Older folks sit on stoops and trade wisdom. And someone always manages to sneak a nap, usually with a hat pulled down over their eyes and one ear tuned to the sound of the missus's footsteps. By evening, the sun starts to dip, and you find yourself almost wishing Sunday could last just a little bit longer. The chores are still there, but the pace is slower, the air is softer, and the laughter is easier. It's a small pocket of calm in a world that rarely offers any. When the last song fades and the kids have finally stopped squirming, you gather your family close, say a quiet prayer for the week ahead, and remind yourself that even a rest day can be an act of survival. Sundays on the plantation aren't about rest. They're about resilience, about claiming a few scraps of joy in a world that tries to keep you on your feet. And if all you get is a nap and a new recipe for biscuits, you count it as a win. If your dress has more patches than fabric, congratulations, you're the height of enslaved fashion. Sewing happens at night, under candlelight or moonlight, with stolen thread and gossip as your soundtrack. Every finished shirt is a tiny victory. Every missing button is blamed on the chickens. If you've ever wondered what it's like to turn rags into runway, welcome to the original make, do, and mend. On the plantation, clothing is precious, and every piece tells a story, usually a story of survival, cleverness, and more than a little exasperation. New clothes are a twice-a-year miracle, handed out with the same enthusiasm as a dentist appointment. When your dress arrives, you inspect it for durability, not style. Is the fabric thick enough to last another season in the field? Is the hem already fraying? Is the color going to hide dirt? Or is it wishful thinking? Most likely, it's one size fits none, and you're expected to make it work. So, the patchwork begins. You save every scrap. Old shirts, worn-out aprons, even feed sacks become prized material. The best patches are stolen, with love, from someone who no longer needs them, passed down from aunt to sister to cousin until no one remembers where the original fabric started. A clever hand can turn a faded skirt into a halfway decent bodice and still have enough left over for a headscarf. If you ever wondered how fashion icons manage layering, just try keeping your legs warm with 3 different skirts, each one a different length and none of them straight. Sewing is a communal event and a necessary one. After a day of work, you sit together around a candle or, if you're lucky, a little fire outside. Needles are precious, thread even more so. If you're caught borrowing from the big house's sewing basket, you'll never hear the end of it, so you get creative, unraveling old socks for thread, twisting bits of string, or, in a true act of desperation, trying your promsant luck with horsehair. Spoiler: it's itchy, but it'll do in a pinch. The conversation flows as fast as the stitching. This is the time for trading news, sharing a laugh, or complaining about the state of the plantation's laundry. You learn who's courting whom, which children outgrew their trousers overnight, and who managed to outsmart the overseer that week. Sewing becomes more than just a chore. It's the original support group, where every groan about a ripped sleeve is met with advice, sympathy, and at least one ridiculous story about someone's skirt falling off at the worst possible moment. Every finished piece of clothing is a triumph. A shirt that fits, a skirt that doesn't drag in the mud, a scarf that covers the holes in your best dress. These are victories. A well-placed patch can hide a world of wear and tear. Buttons are worth their weight in gold. And when you finally find a matching pair, you celebrate like you've won the lottery, which, technically, you have, if you consider not being chilly a grand prize. Sometimes you get fancy. If there's a colored scrap or a ribbon rescued from the trash, you might sew it into your dress, just for the pleasure of a little beauty. It's a small act of rebellion, a sign that you refuse to let the world make you drab, no matter how hard it tries. Of course, not everything goes smoothly. Someone will inevitably stab themselves with a needle, lose the thimble, or have a wardrobe malfunction right in front of the master. When this happens, you laugh, sometimes until you cry. Because if you can't find humor in the absurdity of making a dress out of a flour sack, what's the point? So, you keep stitching. Every patch is proof that you can turn nothing into something, rags into clothing, and hardship into a kind of shared artistry. The patchwork economy is more than a way to cover your body. It's a symbol of survival, solidarity, and style in a place determined to strip those things away. And if the chickens really do eat your buttons, well, at least you've got a story to tell. So here we are, drifting back into the present after a night in a world where survival meant more than just remembering your online passwords or finding matching socks. Tonight, you've lived through sunrises that come too early, worked until your bones ached, juggled 100 chores without a single thank you, and somehow, through it all, found reasons to laugh, love, and keep going. You've navigated rules that made less sense than your office's HR handbook, learned how to patch a dress with more hope than fabric, and discovered that the human spirit can find music, faith, and even joy in the most unlikely places. Through every whispered story, every work song, every patchwork quilt, you've seen how even the smallest acts of resistance, laughter, kindness, a sly joke, became a quiet rebellion against a system designed to break them. Enslaved women on southern plantations endured the unendurable. They survived under rules that were cruel, arbitrary, and ever-changing, facing threats most of us can't even imagine. Yet they still managed to build communities, to protect each other, and to dream. Every lullaby hummed in the dark, every tale passed down to a child, every stolen moment of peace was a reminder. Hope is stubborn, survival is an art, and dignity is something nobody can take away for long. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into a real bed, no straw, no drafty floor, no one calling you at midnight to wash their socks, maybe pause for a second, whisper a thank you for your ancestors, or for anyone who came before you,